I want to start this by saying I never meant to be the villain in someone else's story. But sitting here in my friend's guest room, scrolling through Instagram at 3 a.m., I'm starting to realize that's exactly what I've become. I'm Tina, 32, from Michigan, and I need to tell you about how one stupid comment at a party destroyed the careful house of cards I'd built my life on. You know those nature documentaries where they show how a tiny shift in the ecosystem can cause this huge chain reaction? That's what happened here. Except the ecosystem was my marriage, and the tiny shift was me finally saying out loud what I'd been thinking for years. But I should probably start at the beginning, back when I thought I had everything figured out. I met Caleb 7 years ago at my cousin's baby shower. He was the photographer, and honestly, I barely noticed him at first. He was this bigger guy with kind eyes and a camera, just part of the background while I was focused on my own drama. See, back then, I was wrapped up in this situation with James, this gorgeous pharmaceutical rep I'd been hooking up with for almost 2 years. James was, well, imagine if someone took every hot guy from a dating app and combined them into one person. Tall, fit, drove a Tesla, had this whole luxurious lifestyle thing going on. We had this amazing physical chemistry, but he kept saying he wasn't ready for anything serious. I spent 3 years making excuses for him, buying designer clothes I couldn't afford to fit into his world, pretending it didn't hurt when he'd ghost me for weeks, then show up at 2 a.m. like nothing happened. Meanwhile, Caleb kept showing up at family events and mutual friends' parties. He'd always make a point to talk to me, ask about my nursing career, remember little details about stories I'd told months ago. He asked me out maybe 4 or 5 times over those years, but I always had some excuse. I'm kind of seeing someone, I'd say, even though James hadn't texted me back in 2 weeks. Looking back, I think what really got to me was how Caleb never seemed bothered by my rejections. He'd just smile, say, maybe next time, and go back to making everyone else laugh with his dad jokes. It was like he was so comfortable with himself, even though he didn't look like the guys I usually dated. I didn't understand that kind of confidence back then. Everything changed when James got a job offer in Seattle. He didn't even tell me himself. I found out through his sister's Facebook post congratulating him. 3 months later, my Instagram feed was full of pictures of him and this yoga instructor named Summer doing headstands on the beach and tagging each other in inspirational quotes about finding your soulmate. I was a mess. 30 years old, $50,000 in credit card debt from trying to keep up with James's lifestyle, and suddenly very aware that all my friends were getting married and having kids, while I was still clinging to this fantasy of James realizing I was the one. That's when I started looking at Caleb differently. He had his own successful photography business, shooting weddings and events on the weekends, while doing commercial work during the week. He owned this cute little house in a good neighborhood. Every time I ran into him, he had these stories about projects he was working on, or places he'd traveled for shoots. He wasn't living some flashy lifestyle, but he was stable, secure, safe. When he asked me out again at another friend's wedding, I said yes. I told myself I was being mature, choosing substance over surface. But here's the truth I've never told anyone until now. I was terrified of ending up alone, and Caleb felt like my last chance at a normal life. I knew physical attraction might be an issue, so I came up with this whole thing about being celibate until marriage. I'd seen it work for my super religious cousin. Her husband waited 2 years. Caleb, being the genuine person he is, completely respected it. Never pressured me, never complained, which only made me feel worse about lying. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. Everyone said it was fast, but I was already 30, and he was 33. And it just seemed like, why wait? The engagement party was the first time I'd tried to convince myself to be physically intimate, but I couldn't do it. I kept making excuses, stress from wedding planning, headaches, early shifts at the hospital. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. I remember standing there in my dress, looking at Caleb in his tux, thinking, this is fine, this is good enough, love will grow. My maid of honor caught me crying in the bathroom and assumed they were happy tears. They weren't. I genuinely thought things would change after marriage. That some switch would flip and I'd suddenly be attracted to him. Instead, I found myself inventing more excuses. Working extra shifts at the hospital just to avoid coming home. Starting secret credit cards to buy things that made me feel better. Designer bags, expensive skincare, workout classes I never attended. The girls at work became my main outlet. During breaks, I'd vent about how frustrating it was watching Caleb struggle with his weight. He was trying, going to the gym, meal prepping, all that stuff. But it wasn't the dramatic transformation I secretly hoped for. I'd see these fit doctors at work, especially Dr. Mitchell with his perfect jawline and Peloton lifestyle, and just feel cheated. The worst part? Caleb was actually a great husband. He supported my career, made me laugh, remembered every anniversary and birthday. He'd wake up early to make me coffee before my shifts, even though he'd been up late editing photos. When I was stressed, he'd run me bubble baths and leave little encouraging notes around the house. But every time he touched me, I had to fight the urge to pull away. Every time he initiated intimacy, I'd find some excuse. Early shift tomorrow. Migraine. Too stressed. The lies became so routine, I almost believed them myself. And now, after what happened at that hospital staff party, I'm realizing that maybe I wasn't just lying to him. Maybe I've been lying to myself this whole time about what kind of person I am. It started getting worse about 6 months ago. Looking back, I think it was because of social media, isn't it always? James's wife had their first baby, and suddenly my feed was full of this perfect little family. Their matching workout outfits, their dream home in Seattle, their organic baby food prep. I spent 3 hours one night scrolling through every single photo, torturing myself with their perfect life. That same week, Caleb got this huge booking, a celebrity wedding in Chicago. He was so excited, running around the house, planning all these creative shots. All I could think about was how embarrassing it would be if people found out I was married to the fat photographer. I actually logged onto Instagram and untagged myself from every photo he'd posted of us together. The girls at work became my therapy circle, but looking back, I think they were more like enablers. Every break room session turned into a venting session about Caleb. You won't believe what he ate for dinner. He says he's going to the gym, but I'm not seeing results. I had to pretend to be asleep when he tried to initiate last night. Sarah, one of the newer nurses, would always egg me on. Girl, you're too hot to be dealing with this, she'd say. My cousin's friend lost 100 pounds in 6 months on that new medication. Maybe you should leave some pamphlets around the house. I reacted to all her mean comments, adding my own stories, never thinking about how they might get back to Caleb. Dr. Mitchell made everything more complicated. He started working out of our hospital twice a week, and suddenly I was fixing my makeup before rounds, volunteering for extra cardiac floor shifts. He'd flirt in that subtle doctor way, complimenting my clinical skills, asking about my weekend plans, touching my arm while laughing at my jokes. One day, he caught me crying in the supply closet after seeing James's Christmas card photo. Instead of walking away awkwardly like most people would, he sat with me for 20 minutes, letting me vent about my marriage without judgment. It's normal to have doubts, he said, but you have to be honest with yourself about what you really want. I started imagining this alternate reality where I'd waited, where I hadn't settled. In my head, I'd be married to someone like Dr. Mitchell. Successful, fit, someone I'd be proud to post about on social media. Instead, I was sneaking around deleting photos of my actual husband and making up excuses to avoid intimacy. The credit cards got out of control. I'd shop online late at night, buying things I thought would make me feel better. Expensive gym memberships I never used, designer clothes that sat in my closet with tags still on. Every time Caleb talked about saving for a house, I'd feel this knot of guilt in my stomach, knowing I was thousands of dollars in debt without him knowing. It wasn't just money I was hiding. I started lying about small things, then bigger things. Telling him I was working late when I was actually sitting in my car in the Target parking lot, scrolling through dating apps, just to see what was out there. Making up girls' nights when I was really sitting alone at bars, hoping someone would hit on me just so I could feel desirable again. Caleb tried so hard to make things work. He'd plan these date nights, trying to recreate our early dating days, but all I could think about was how his shirt pulled tight across his stomach, how he got winded walking upstairs, how different he looked from the men I saw at work every day. The breaking point should have been when he found a fertility pamphlet in my purse. I'd been telling him I wanted to wait to try for kids, using it as another excuse to avoid intimacy. The truth was, I'd been secretly taking birth control the whole time. When he asked about the pamphlet, so hopeful about starting a family, I lied and said my friend asked me to pick it up for her. The look on his face, I think he knew I was lying. But instead of calling me out, he just said, "Whatever timeline you need, I'm here." That should have been my wake-up call. Instead, it just made me resent him more. Why couldn't he be angry? Why couldn't he fight back? Why was he always so understanding? I started making these little passive-aggressive comments, testing his limits. Maybe we should get a bigger table. This one's getting a bit snug for you. Are you sure you want dessert? You were just saying your knees hurt from carrying all that equipment. I'd love to go hiking with my work friends, but I'm worried you couldn't keep up. He'd just take it, quietly pushing food around his plate or making jokes to deflect. Sometimes I'd catch this hurt look in his eyes, but it would disappear so quickly, I could pretend I hadn't seen it. He started eating dinner in his home office more often, saying he had deadlines, but I knew he was just avoiding my comments. The irony? He was actually losing weight, slowly, consistently, the healthy way. But it wasn't fast enough for me. I wanted this dramatic transformation, this big reveal like you see on TV shows. Instead, it was just small changes. Looser shirts, one notch tighter on his belt, slightly less heavy breathing on stairs. Everything came to a head at that stupid hospital staff party. I didn't even want him to come, but he'd just finished this big wedding shoot and was in such a good mood. He kept talking about wanting to meet my work friends, since I talked about them so much. If I'd known how it would all play out, maybe I would have tried harder to talk him out of it. Or maybe, if I'm being really honest, some part of me wanted everything to blow up. The party was at Amber's house, one of those cute craftsman homes she'd bought with her surgeon husband. The kind of house Caleb and I could probably afford if I hadn't been secretly maxing out credit cards for years. Everyone from our floor was there, plus some doctors and their spouses. I started drinking wine the minute we walked in, trying to calm my nerves about my work life and home life colliding. Caleb was actually doing great at first, charming everyone with stories about crazy wedding photos and entitled bridezillas. He had this way of telling stories that made everyone laugh, and I could see my coworkers warming up to him. Even Dr. Mitchell seemed impressed by some of Caleb's corporate photography clients. Then, Amber brought out the food. She'd gone all out, this huge spread of appetizers, main dishes, desserts. I watched in horror as Caleb filled his plate with mac and cheese, wings, and these little bacon-wrapped dates. Sarah caught my eye and smirked. She'd heard all my break room rants about his eating habits. I was on my third glass of wine by then, feeling that dangerous mix of anxiety and liquid courage. Dr. Mitchell came over while Caleb was deep in conversation with one of the surgical residents about camera equipment. He looked amazing in this fitted blue button-down that showed off his gym results. The wine must have made me brave, because I found myself flirting more obviously than usual, laughing too loud at his jokes, touching his arm when he said something funny. I kept glancing at Caleb, almost hoping he'd notice and say something. But he was completely oblivious, showing someone pictures on his camera and laughing about some wedding disaster story. That just made me more annoyed. How could he not see how I was acting? How could he be so confident and happy when I was this miserable? That's when Amber started this stupid party game, Never Have I Ever, but with a twist, where you had to explain your answers. Everyone was pretty tipsy by then, sharing increasingly personal stories. The spouses were all getting into it too, making it this couple's thing. Caleb was still across the room, but he was clearly listening and laughing along. Someone said, "Never have I ever faked being too tired for sex," and all the girls started laughing and sharing stories about headaches and early meetings. When it got to me, I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was seeing Dr. Mitchell flirt with one of the new pharmacy techs. Maybe it was just years of resentment finally bubbling over. "Oh my God, I'm the queen of fake headaches," I heard myself saying, way too loud. Like, sorry, honey, but when you're breathing heavy, just walking up the stairs, I can't exactly get in the mood. Everyone laughed, but I didn't stop there. The filter between my brain and mouth was completely gone. I mean, I love him, but I told him I was celibate before marriage because I couldn't figure out how to say, I'm not attracted to you, but you're stable and nice. Like, what was I supposed to say? Hey, you're a great guy, but the thought of you touching me makes me want to cry? The room got quiet. Like, dead quiet. You know that moment in movies where someone says something horrible and the record scratches? It was exactly like that, except worse, because it was real. I turned around and there was Caleb, standing in the doorway with 2 drinks in his hands. He'd gone to get us refills. The look on his face, I'd never seen him look like that before. His hands were shaking so bad, he spilled both drinks on Amber's fancy rug. Dr. Mitchell cleared his throat and suddenly needed to make a phone call. Sarah wouldn't even meet my eyes. Amber, who'd been my work bestie for 3 years, just said, "Jesus Christ, Tina," under her breath. The worst part? Caleb didn't storm out. He didn't yell. He just set down the glasses, walked over, and very quietly said, "I think we should head home." The car ride was silent. Not the normal kind of silent after a fight, but this heavy, final kind of silence. I tried to explain, told him he was being too sensitive, that it was just a stupid party game, that everyone says things they don't mean when they're drinking. He just kept driving, hands gripped so tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles were white. When we got home, I thought maybe we'd fight it out, and everything would go back to normal. Instead, he looked at me and said something that made my blood run cold. "I've been working with a therapist for the past 6 months. Not just about my weight, about us, about how you make me feel. I just never had the courage to admit what I knew deep down." That's when he told me he knew everything. The credit cards, the things I said about him at work, the fact that I only married him because James moved away. Apparently, one of the nurses, I still don't know who, has a spouse who works with Caleb sometimes, and they've been keeping him informed. He even knew about Dr. Mitchell and how I act around him. I kept telling myself it would get better. He said, his voice scarily calm, that if I just tried harder, lost more weight, made more money, you'd finally see me. But that's not the problem, is it, Tina? The problem is you never saw me at all. I tried to turn it around on him, told him he violated my privacy by having people spy on me at work, asked him why he never confronted me about the credit cards if he knew, reminded him that he wasn't exactly Mr. Perfect himself. But he just started packing a bag. "Where are you going?" I demanded. "You can't just leave, we need to talk about this." He turned to me with this look I'd never seen before, not angry, not sad, just done. "No," he said. "We needed to talk about this 2 years ago before you married me under false pretenses. We needed to talk about this every time you made me feel less than human. We needed to talk about this before you humiliated me in front of your entire workplace. But now I'm done talking." He walked out that night with just one bag. I stayed up until 4 a.m., sitting on our couch, waiting for him to cool off and come back. He'd always come back before, after every snippy comment, every joke about his weight, every time I rejected his touch. But this time was different. This time, I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I called in sick to work the next day, sending Margaret some vague text about a stomach bug. She replied with just, "Take all the time you need." Something about her tone made me wonder if she already knew what had happened. Word travels fast in hospital circles, and I'd basically nuked my marriage in front of half the cardiac floor staff. By day 3, I was getting desperate. Caleb hadn't answered any of my calls or texts. His brother came by to get more of his things, clothes, his backup camera equipment, his home office stuff. I tried to explain my side to him, but he just looked at me with this mix of disgust and pity. "You know what's crazy, Tina?" he said while packing up Caleb's favorite coffee mug. "If you'd been honest from the start, you could have had a real friend in Caleb. Instead, you used him as a backup plan and treated him like garbage when he didn't magically turn into James." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. Because he was right, wasn't he? I'd never given Caleb a real chance. I'd been comparing him to James from day one, punishing him for not being someone he never claimed to be. When I finally dragged myself back to work, it was worse than I imagined. You know that scene in movies where someone walks in and all conversation stops? Yeah, it's actually like that in real life. The morning huddle was excruciating. Nobody would make eye contact with me except Margaret, and that was only to tell me I'd been reassigned to the geriatric ward, away from Dr. Mitchell's cardiac unit. It's not personal, Margaret said, but her tone made it clear it was absolutely personal. We just feel this assignment better suits the current situation. Translation: they're keeping me away from the doctors because they don't trust me anymore. Because everyone knows what kind of person I really am now. Amber, my supposed best work friend, switched her breaks to avoid me. When I finally cornered her in the supply closet, she just shook her head. "You don't get it, do you?" she said. "It's not just what you said at the party. It's the fact that we've all been enabling your behavior for months. Every time you came to us complaining about Caleb, we should have called you out instead of nodding along." I tried to explain that I was just venting, like everyone does about their relationships. She cut me off. "No, Tina, we vent about our husbands leaving dishes in the sink or forgetting anniversaries. You systematically destroyed that man's self-esteem while lying to him and racking up secret debt. And now you're playing victim because it blew up in your face." Dr. Mitchell? He pretends I don't exist now. Turns out his wife is a big client of Caleb's photography business. They hired him for their daughter's wedding last year. Small world, right? He told Margaret he doesn't want me assisting on any of his cases anymore. "Mr. Your husband's a lucky guy, won't even look at me during rounds." The worst part was finding out how many people knew about Caleb's transformation journey before it all fell apart. Apparently, he'd been working with a trainer at this gym where a lot of the residents work out. He'd lost almost 30 pounds in the 6 months he'd been in therapy, and I hadn't even noticed because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself. One of the surgical residents tried to be kind, in that backhanded way people have when they're judging you. "He talks about you in his therapy group sometimes," she said. "Never anything bad, just how much he wished he could make you happy. How he kept trying to figure out what he was doing wrong." I tried reaching out to some of our old mutual friends, thinking maybe they'd help me talk to him. Turns out most of them knew about his therapy, his weight loss journey, everything. They'd been supporting him for months while I was bad-mouthing him at work. Katie, who I thought was my friend first, told me she couldn't even look at me the same after finding out how I'd treated him. "You know what the saddest part is?" she said. "He never once spoke badly about you, even in therapy, even after everything you said, he just focused on healing himself. Meanwhile, you're still trying to make yourself the victim in a situation you created." The final blow came when I got served with divorce papers at work. Right there at the nurse's station, in front of everyone. The courier didn't even try to be discreet, just announced my name and handed me the envelope like he was delivering a prize. Inside was a detailed account of everything. The credit cards, the recordings of me talking about him at work, screenshots of texts where I mocked him to Sarah. He's requesting that I be responsible for all my credit card debt in the divorce since I opened the cards fraudulently during our marriage. Do you know how much that is? I've been transferring balances, opening new cards, playing this shell game for so long I'd lost track. When I finally sat down and added it all up, $47,000. I owe $47,000 that I have absolutely no way to pay. My lawyer, the only one who would take my case after 3 others turned me down, says I should consider bankruptcy. But that would mean losing my nursing license. I'd have to start completely over at 32, with no husband, no career, and no prospects. The irony? Caleb's photography business is booming. Turns out being the victim of a toxic marriage has given him this whole new brand narrative. He's doing this series about transformation and self-worth, and it's going viral on social media. Everyone loves a good glow-up story, especially when there's a villain to root against. And I'm definitely the villain in this story. No matter how I try to spin it, no matter what excuses I make, the truth is right there in black and white. I married a good man for the wrong reasons, spent years tearing him down, and then humiliated him in front of my entire workplace. Now he's thriving without me, while I'm scrambling to keep my life from completely falling apart. I thought rock bottom was the party. Then I thought it was getting served divorce papers at work. But rock bottom keeps getting lower. Last week, I stopped by our favorite coffee shop, the one where Caleb proposed, thinking maybe I'd run into him. The barista, who used to always give us free pastries, wouldn't even take my order. Turns out she's been following Caleb's transformation journey on Instagram, and she's not comfortable serving someone who could treat another human being that way. That's when I finally broke down and looked at his social media. I'd been avoiding it, telling myself it would just make things worse. I was right. His photography business page is thriving, full of these stunning wedding photos and high-end corporate events. But it's his personal page that really got to me. He's lost 60 pounds since moving out. There are progress photos, gym check-ins, meal prep videos, but it's not just the physical transformation. He's got this light in his eyes now, this confidence I never saw when we were together. Or maybe I just never bothered to look. The comment section is what really killed me. All these people calling him inspiring, praising his strength for leaving a toxic situation. His latest post was about learning to love yourself even when others try to dim your light. 10,000 likes, 3,000 shares. Hundreds of comments about what a queen his ex-wife must have been. How they've been through similar situations with partners who tried to destroy their self-worth. I made the mistake of clicking on the latest Transformation Tuesday post. It was a side-by-side of him at our wedding versus now. The caption talked about how sometimes the weight you need to lose isn't physical. Sometimes it's the weight of other people's expectations, of living a lie, of trying to make someone love you who never really wanted to in the first place. And there, right in the comments, was James. Freaking James from Seattle, commenting about how proud he is of Caleb's journey and how they need to grab coffee next time he's in town. Apparently, they connected through a mutual client, and now they're bros or something? The guy I pined over for years, who I compared my husband to constantly, is now publicly supporting my soon-to-be ex-husband's glow-up. I tried reaching out to Caleb one last time, sent this long email about how sorry I am, how I've realized my mistakes, how maybe we could try counseling. His response was a single sentence: "Please direct all communication through my lawyer." Cold. Professional. Final. The lawyer was even worse. Turns out Caleb's been documenting everything for months. Every nasty comment I made about his weight, every time I rejected intimacy with a fake excuse, every credit card I opened in secret, every conversation my coworkers reported back about how I talked about him at work. My client, his lawyer said, like Caleb wasn't the man I'd shared a bed with for 2 years, is willing to be generous in the divorce settlement despite the documented emotional abuse and financial fraud. He'll assume half the mortgage debt on the house, but all credit card debt remains your responsibility. Generous. He's being generous by not completely destroying me in court, even though he could. Even though I probably deserve it. The lawyer laid it out very clearly. They have enough evidence of my financial deception and emotional abuse to make things very difficult for me, both legally and professionally. But Caleb doesn't want that. He just wants out. I tried playing the victim card one last time, telling the lawyer about my own struggles, my insecurities, how I was dealing with trauma from my relationship with James. The lawyer just slid another document across the table. Printouts of my break room conversations, where I'd bragged about manipulating Caleb, about how I'd settled for him because I needed financial stability. "Miss Reynolds," she said, using my maiden name like my married one was already gone, "I've been practicing family law for 20 years. I've seen countless cases of emotional abuse and manipulation. Rarely have I seen someone document their own cruelty so thoroughly on social media and in workplace conversations. My advice? Sign the papers. Take the generous offer. Let my client move on with his life." The worst part? While I'm drowning in debt and workplace drama, Caleb's thriving. His business has expanded into this whole new market, specializing in transformation photography. Before and after photos, fitness journeys, life change documentation. He's got a waiting list, 6 months long, and a social media following that grows every day. Someone sent me a link to a podcast he was on recently. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. He talked about his journey, about realizing he deserved better, about how therapy helped him understand that someone else's cruelty is about them, not you. He never mentioned me by name, never said anything negative. Just talked about growing through pain, about choosing yourself, about not letting someone else's issues become your identity. The host asked him if he had any regrets. You know what he said? I regret not loving myself enough to leave sooner. I regret accepting scraps of affection and telling myself it was a feast. But I don't regret the experience because it taught me what I deserve. It taught me that being alone is better than being with someone who sees you as their backup plan. I had to pull over and throw up after hearing that. Because he was right. He was always right. I never saw him as a person. He was just my safety net, my backup plan, my insurance against dying alone. And now he's out there living his best life, inspiring thousands of people, while I'm living in my married friend's guest room, working night shifts at a job where everyone hates me, dodging calls from credit card companies. Last night, I hit what I thought was rock bottom. I was picking up a DoorDash order at this trendy new restaurant downtown. Because that's my life now, doing food delivery after my nursing shifts to make minimum payments on my credit cards. And there they were, Caleb and his new girlfriend. She's a pediatric surgeon. Of course she is. I'd heard rumors about them dating, but seeing them together in person was something else entirely. She's not even Instagram model gorgeous. She's got this natural, confident kind of beauty, the kind that comes from actually being comfortable in your own skin. They were sitting at this corner table, sharing some fancy appetizer and laughing about something on his phone. He looks amazing, not just the weight loss, but everything about him. New haircut, stylish clothes, this energy that just radiates happiness. I stood there frozen, holding someone else's dinner, watching my ex-husband live the life I always wanted. The worst part? When he finally noticed me, he just nodded. Like I was some distant acquaintance from high school. No anger, no satisfaction at seeing me in my DoorDash uniform, not even pity. Just polite acknowledgement before turning back to his date. The old Caleb would have at least tried to make awkward small talk, maybe even introduced me. But this Caleb? I didn't even register as important enough to interrupt his conversation. I called in sick to both jobs and spent the next day stalking their social media. They're training for a half marathon together. She comments on all his transformation posts with these genuinely supportive messages. There's this photo of them at some charity event, both all sweaty and laughing, arms around each other, looking like they actually want to be touching each other. His latest post really twisted the knife. It was a long caption about finding unexpected joy after hardship, about how sometimes the worst things that happen to you lead you to the best things. The comments were full of people tagging their partners, talking about how they met after leaving toxic relationships. His girlfriend commented with a simple heart emoji, and he replied, "Thank you for showing me what real love feels like." I ran into James at the grocery store last week. Turns out he's in town more often now, working on some project. You know what he said to me? Saw Caleb at the gym yesterday. Man, what a great guy. Can't believe how you treated him. James, the guy I spent years pining over, the reason I settled for Caleb in the first place, is now judging me for how I treated someone? The divorce is almost final. My lawyer says I should seriously consider bankruptcy because of the credit card debt, but that would mean losing my nursing license. I can't believe this is my life now. I'm 32, living in someone's guest room, drowning in debt, working 2 jobs where people either hate me or pity me, while my ex-husband is out there thriving. Sarah, the nurse who used to laugh at all my jokes about Caleb, came to me yesterday with this look of pity. You know what's crazy? She said. If you had actually given him a chance, actually loved him for who he was, you could have had this amazing life. He was already successful, already kind, already devoted to you. Instead, you couldn't see past his weight. And now look, he's got everything you wanted, just with someone who appreciates him. I wish I could say she's wrong. I wish I could say I've learned some profound lesson about love and acceptance. But honestly, the thing that keeps me up at night isn't that I hurt someone who loved me. It's that I had this whole life planned out. The successful husband, the big house, the perfect Instagram photos, and now he's living that life with someone else, while I'm here, telling my story to strangers on the internet, hoping someone will tell me I'm not the bad guy. My sister says I need therapy, that I need to work on myself before I can have a healthy relationship. She's probably right, but every time I think about talking to a therapist, I remember that Caleb was in therapy because of me. That there are probably recordings of him talking about how I made him feel. That somewhere in this city, there's a therapist who knows exactly what kind of person I am. The most recent development? Caleb's therapy journey is being turned into a documentary. Some indie filmmaker saw his transformation posts and reached out about telling his story. They're focusing on mental health, self-worth, and breaking free from toxic relationships. He's going to be the face of healing from emotional abuse, while I'm going to be the cautionary tale. Everyone keeps saying this is karma, that I'm getting what I deserve. Maybe they're right. Or maybe the real karma is having to watch the person you thought wasn't good enough become everything you wanted, while you realize you were the one who wasn't good enough all along. So yeah, that's my story. How one joke at a party exposed years of lies and manipulation. How I lost my husband, my friends, my reputation, and my financial stability, all because I couldn't appreciate what was right in front of me. Would I do things differently if I could go back? Probably. But not for the reasons everyone thinks. Not because I've had some grand epiphany about inner beauty or whatever. I'd do things differently because I didn't realize that the safe choice, the backup plan, the nice guy I settled for, he was actually the catch, and now someone else is living the life I could have had while I'm here, alone in a borrowed room, watching through social media as my ex-husband becomes an inspiration to thousands. And the worst part? He's probably going to use this whole thing in his documentary, while I'm still trying to convince myself it wasn't my fault. Life's funny like that, isn't it?